Sunday, September 14, 1919. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Greenpoint oil fire spreads, jumps creek. All city firemen on duty. 6 reported missing. 36 tanks of oil, gasoline, and naphtha at Sun and Fleming plant burning at midnight. Flames finally make headway across Newtown Creek Bridge. Explosions of tanks terrorize residents of Greenpoint, who prepare to flee their homes. Many injured. After 10 hours' work on the part of nearly all of the Brooklyn and Manhattan fire companies, the most furious fire Brooklyn has seen in years, the blaze which swept the storage tanks of the Sun and Fleming Oil Works in Greenpoint yesterday afternoon and last night, was still raging at midnight and spreading. Great parts of Greenpoint and Williamsburg were being evacuated all through the evening and night by terrified people. The loss will run into the millions. It was reported by the police at 11:30 that 6 firemen, including Captain Golden of Hook and Ladder Company 106 of Greenpoint Avenue, were missing. Herbert L. Pratt of the Standard Oil Company early this morning estimated that the loss in burning oil and exploded tanks alone amounted to $1 million. This does not include damage to the rest of the plant and the loss sustained by the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, which it is estimated will exceed all told $5 million. When 35 out of a total of 100 oil, gasoline, and naphtha tanks at the plant, which lies between Norman, Greenpoint, and Kingsland Avenues and Newtown Creek, were a roaring furnace at 11 o'clock last night, Borough Inspector Thomas P. Murphy ordered everyone out of the entire section within 4 blocks of the fire. It is intimated that people living further away would be ordered to safety during the night. All fire companies called. Every fire company in New York City that could be spared was on the scene. It was stated by fire chiefs that it looked as if the fire would go on until it burned itself out. The 4-story office building of the Sun and Fleming Company at 400 Kingsland Avenue was gutted at 10:30 o'clock as the flames spread. The 4 molasses tanks of the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Plant were being pumped out as the fire jumped across Newtown Creek and set ablaze the 4-story building of the American Candle Company in Long Island City. At 1:30 this morning, the fire was being confined to the Sun and Fleming Oil Works, the plant of the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. Grave concern was expressed for 6 or 7 tanks containing naphtha, a terribly high explosive. The tanks were close to the flames and were in serious danger. Everyone, including newspapermen, was ordered away from Kingsland Avenue. At 10:15 o'clock, the fire department sounded its recall signal, all officers and firemen of Queens and Brooklyn back to their work, no matter where they might be. It was the first time the recall signal had been sounded since the inauguration of the 2-platoon system. At midnight, the plant of the United States Industrial Alcohol Company was almost completely gone, the tanks having been wiped out by flames one by one. The tanks of the Queens branch of the Standard Oil Company in Review Avenue, Long Island City, had caught fire. The Greenpoint Avenue Bridge was also burning fast. After a water tower on the Miller Building on Greenpoint and Kingsland Avenues was burned, firemen started to protect that building. It was announced that 2 firemen who had been on a fireboat in the creek were missing. It was also said that it is entirely impossible for a salvage corps of any kind to get into the scene of the fiercest flames. Shortly after midnight, it was reported that all the lights in Greenpoint were going out. The lights in residences failed entirely, while those in the stores began to flicker. It was also said that the entire city was being stripped of fire apparatus, which was being sent to the fire. The Brooklyn Rapid Transit reported at a late hour that the Crosstown, Graham, Union, Lorimer, Greenpoint, Meeker, and Nassau Avenue car lines were tied up. The sky above the neighborhood was brilliantly illuminated, so much so, in fact, that one could see as though in daylight. All along Greenpoint Avenue, crowds could be seen preparing to leave their homes should the flames spread further. Burning oil flung hundreds of feet into the air by intermittent explosions severely injured Harry Johnson of 121 Kingsland Avenue, Hugh Summers of 296 Ryerson Street, James Turbridy, Dennis O'Sullivan of 837 Halsey Street, and Lieutenant William Brown of 128 Star Street. The damages were tremendous. 100 tanks, each 96 feet in diameter and 42 feet high, and each containing from 1,000 to 2,700 barrels containing 55 gallons of oil, were affected. Alcohol, crude oil, gasoline, benzene, naphtha, and various chemicals were in the tanks. 35 were burning at 11 o'clock. It was the most spectacular fire Brooklyn has experienced in years. All afternoon, great volumes of black smoke rose to the sky, drifted out over Long Island and the ocean. The smoke was visible at least 40 miles out on the island. The fire started at 1:45 yesterday afternoon with the explosion of Tank 36 containing 55,000 gallons of gasoline. At 1:40 o'clock, Jay Gould, an inspector for the Columbia Distillery Company of Kingsland and Greenpoint Avenues, examined the tanks of the oil works, which extends from Newtown Creek to Sutton Street and from Norman Avenue to Greenpoint Avenue. He proceeded on his way, having found the tanks in good condition. 5 minutes later, it extended to 3 large tanks. 4 hours later, it ate its way onto other tanks and burst into tremendous flames. The tremendous headway gained by the blaze was caused by the fact that the emergency apparatus used for combating just such blazes failed completely at the crucial moment. Fires are common at the plant, it was said. They are usually choked by live steam. The steam apparatus broke down yesterday and gave the blaze a flying start. With the third alarm, Deputy Fire Chief Smokey Joe Martin responded. After a short examination of the ground, he sent in a fourth alarm, then the 5-5 alarm, and finally, when he saw that all the men he could summon could not cope with the situation, he called the Borough Alarm for Manhattan Fire Apparatus. 9 fireboats and 475 firemen battle flames. There were no indications at 5 o'clock that the flames were being gotten under control. 6 standard oil boats, in addition to 3 municipal boats, were pumping water into the fire, which also was being fought by 475 firemen attached to 32 engine companies and 8 truck companies. The flames at first were confined to 1 gasoline tank situated nearly in the center of the territory bounded by the creek, Kingsland Avenue, Norman Avenue, and Greenpoint Avenues. 700 girls employed by the Pierce Dye Works on Kingsland Avenue were assembled at their work and marched to safety. Tenants, most crying women and children, calling for their fathers and husbands in Italian, Polish, and other languages, were led out of tenement houses at 267 and 269 Norman Avenue and at 331 to 339 Kingsland Avenue to a garage at 265 Norman Avenue. They remained there, weeping and clutching bits of furniture they had taken from their homes. Oil pumped to other yards. While dozens of firemen from dozens of companies run hose lines into the heart of the yards where the blaze was fiercest, company employees fixed underground apparatus so that oil was poured into pipes, sending it to Blissville near Calvary Cemetery, to Long Island City, to Bayonne, and to the Pratt Oil Works at North 12th Street and at North 6th Street. At about 4 o'clock, the situation looked hopeless. The entire Kings County plant of the Sun and Fleming Company, encompassing 100 tanks, was in danger. 40 tanks were in the area of 700 by 1,500 feet, actually claimed by the flames. The firemen worked heroically, standing only about 20 feet away from the flames that licked their way onward. They poured streams of water upon the tanks and on the flames. So hot were the tanks that the water turned into steam as soon as it touched them. Hundreds of brilliant rainbows of all sizes danced in and out the open spaces between the gusts of smoke. Behind the blaze, conditions were horrible. Dozens of men who knew the ground and who were willing to risk their lives to save the property walked into the flame-claimed area carrying hose. The smoke was so thick that it was impossible to see. Men fell over obstructions, got their eyes full of blinding smoke, and staggered out of the inferno almost overcome. Firemen work in great peril. 2 naphtha tanks adjacent to the burning gasoline tanks were in danger all afternoon. The men risked their lives almost thoughtlessly near the gasoline tanks, but when the flames get thick near the naphtha, they turn to run. At one time, the wind veered and brought the 70-foot-high column of black and gold flames in a line with the dread naphtha tanks. Someone groaned through the air of the flames and hammer of the pumps. My God, there goes the naphtha. Every man dropped his work and ran blindly and frantically for safety. Then the wind turned and the men went back to work. From the Newtown Creek side of the blaze, fireboats 232, 224, 66, 78, and 77 pumped tons and tons of water. At times, at that point, it was as black as night. E. Hussey, a superintendent, was forced to send to the Edison Company for 10 500-candle-power searchlights with 1,800 feet of cable attached to each light. In the late afternoon, and when night fell, the men went into the black hell with these lights, facing a possible explosion and certain death at any moment. They went in and did it, but they were pale and showed it from out their blackened, scorched faces. Ambulances from 3 hospitals on spot. Ambulances from the Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and St. Catherine hospitals attended to the following cases. T.J. Croymeyer of Engine Company 33, Manhattan, who broke his right ankle. Regina Wissolsi, 31, of 341 Kingsland Avenue, became a mother Saturday night. The blaze excited her to the point of illness, so that she had to be removed to the hospital. When she got there, her apartment on the 4th floor of the tenement in which she lived caught fire and was completely destroyed, causing a damage of $1,000. The most terrible moment of the afternoon came at exactly 5:40 o'clock. At that time, the blaze was confined to about 5 tanks. Tank 36 had been the first to go. It had contained 1,000 barrels containing 55 gallons each of oil. Its top had blown off with a tremendous explosion and had ignited Tank 49, containing 2,700 barrels of 55 gallons. 3 other tanks had caught fire and were blazing brilliantly. Their flames completely obscured the sun. Behind the cloud of smoke, the sun came up again and again, just as though a flame-born sunrise was being staged again and again. Suddenly the smoke became less thick and the flames more fierce. Hundreds of men working on Kingsland Avenue and many others back of the fire near the creek bowed their heads, unable to stand the heat. Higher, higher, and ever higher the flames mounted. Fire chiefs, unable to cope with the roar of the fire, used the sign language to command their men. Everybody moved back step by step. Panic follows explosion. A rumble and a roar. There was another explosion. To the mind of nearly every person there came one terrible word: naphtha. And then there was a panic. With the explosion, There had come absolutely unendurable heat, extending out to the men at the corner of Kingsland and Norman Avenues. Hundreds of people ran like people who knew that their lives depended on their running. Dozens fell or trampled on and ran again. One little boy, Alexander Bolchewski, 4.5 years old, of 341 Kingsland Avenue, was carried to the pavement and trampled upon by frantic men. Picked up by Joseph Friedberg of 482 Quincy Street, he was found to have been seriously injured. For almost 5 minutes, flames took the place of smoke in the heavens. But the firemen and laborers, who had been unable to run because they were hemmed in by the flames, kept at their work and fought the new blaze down. A number were overcome, among them George Lantelay of 12th Street, Woodside, Queens, who was treated for suffocation and for a lacerated ankle by Dr. Rappaport of the Greenpoint Hospital. George Painter, 33, of 17 Newell Street, was overcome and treated by Dr. Steiner of St. Catherine's Hospital. Bob Mulgrade of 181 Driggs Ave was almost overcome, but recovered. High-pressure system fails. Throughout the blaze, the firemen were hampered by lack of high pressure. After a disastrous oil fire in 1911, the company had put in a high-pressure pump system. However, the first explosion today ruined the system. While the firemen fought the blaze with water, men fixed the system, but the second explosion ruined it completely again. At 9 o'clock, 9 large tanks were in full blaze, and the 2 naphtha tanks were in such danger that firemen proceeded with the utmost caution. A few minutes after 9 o'clock, 2 other tanks exploded. None of the explosions were accompanied by any great noise or reverberation. A slight pop was sufficient to warn the firemen to drop, and the tremendous onrush of new flames at each new explosion caused the onlookers to run for their lives. The watchers were stretched for blocks along Greenpoint and Norman Avenues. Early in the day, they were stretched 10 or 15 deep along Sutton Street. Later, they were forced back by the heat. Deputy Police Commissioner Wallace burned. Smokey Joe Martin, Dean of all firefighters, remarked to Fire Marshal Brophy at 9 o'clock that everything had gone wrong all day. One of the many public officials on the scene, Deputy Police Commissioner Frederick A. Wallace, was burned about the face by the second explosion. 2 men, Vincent Sweeney, 35, of 185 Eldert Street, and William Brown of Engine Company 18, Manhattan, were burned. John English, a laborer, was removed to the Greenpoint Hospital in a serious condition. Some of the officials on the scene early in the afternoon were Commissioner Charles W. Culkins, Deputy Battalion Chief W. W. Cohen, Deputy Fire Chief William J. Thompson, Chief Inspector Daly, Borough Inspector Boutelier, Inspector Thomas Myers of the 16th Inspection District, and Fire Commissioner Drennan. All the police of the Bedford, Stagg, Herbert, and Greenpoint stations were on the scene all the time. By 10 o'clock, Williamsburg and Greenpoint were terrified by the flames, which rose high into the heavens. For miles and miles, the sky was brilliantly illuminated. Near the 13 tanks which were burning at that time, it was almost as light as day. The crowd watching the flames from afar had been tripled. Light from the fire showed thousands of people crowded into side streets. When the explosions came at 9:30 o'clock, Fire Lieutenant John Burns of Engine Company 5, Manhattan, was caught in the rush. His foot was broken. He was treated by Dr. Fry of the Williamsburg Hospital. 6 were added to the list of injured at 10 o'clock. Arthur Howard, 43 years, 83 Collier Street, Greenpoint Police Reserves, attended for burns by Williamsburg Hospital surgeon. Thomas O'Rourke of Engine Company 18 dislocated his left leg by a fall, was taken to the Greenpoint Hospital. Harry Weissman, 37 of Engine Company 18, was overcome by smoke. John Bender of Engine Company 237 of 1274 Jefferson Avenue was burned on the hands and neck. Thomas McDonough, 37, of 91 Ryerson Street, sprained his right ankle. Joseph Leith, 22, an ambulance driver of a Williamsburg Hospital ambulance, was burned badly on the face, neck, and arms and was taken to the hospital. Patrolman Sarvis of the Greenpoint station, without any aid, removed 25 terrified horses from a stable adjoining a tenement house, 351 Kingsland Avenue. 17 engine companies and 4 truck companies from Manhattan alone were on the scene at 9:30 o'clock. Many of the men unable to stand the strain were relieved by fresh men. Shortly after 9 o'clock, Patrick Fay, 37, of 195 DuPont Street, was arrested and taken to the Greenpoint Avenue station after he had tried to turn in a false fire alarm at Tremont and Oakland Avenues. It was said that his action would be examined for possible connection with the fire.